Get ready for it.
A sweet lover and a baker attend the World Patissier Tournament. That said day is the second and the last day of the Patissier World Tournaments. There are several contestants for this position, but there is a particular contestant on which everyone focuses. This contestant is the one who has wowed everyone since the start of the ceremony, and there are even rumors that he will be the one to be crowned as the greatest patissier that ever existed on the face of the earth. For that particular ceremony, he intends to create the candy sculpture, and just as he had planned, he creates a sculpture that is made of sugar. The sculpture is as giant as you can imagine, and even as he concludes his work, he is also proud of himself. He is super excited to have lived the dream he wants for himself. He dreams for that day to come, and his day is here. He hears the announcement that all the contestants should bring their sweets outside for the final checking and grading, and he calls for the help of one of his colleagues to help him carry this candy sculpture. The sculpture is so huge that he can't carry it alone, and as they try to carry it together, he sees his great dream slipping off his hands. He sees the sculpture falling off and right in his face. He sees it coming to his side. He stands there, and he watches as the candy crumbles and falls on his head. He falls and starts bleeding. In his final moment on Earth, he wonders if he is dying. He can't believe he is dying before actualizing his dreams. He reminds himself that he has worked for that day since the day he was born, and on that day, it turns out to be his death day. He refuses to accept that fact, and he concludes that God is wicked. As he closes his eyes to that earth, he hears a voice asking him if he wants a second chance. The voice tells him that he is ready to give him a second chance he wants, and from that day, he will be called Pastry Miller Mortel. As the voice has told him, he reincarnates into another life, and he finds himself as a child to Casserole Mortel and Agnes Mortel. The young couples live in a rural and empty fief his father got as a war reward, the land of Mortel. The fief is so empty that it can barely produce wheat, let alone any other important thing needed for a person to survive. Upon coming to that area with the other people they have found there, his father desires to make the empty fief a livable place for everyone. With the help of everyone in the community, they begin to cultivate the lands, and they try to grow wheat. They eventually succeed in growing wheat, but it seems that is the only thing they can get from that city. They continue with their hard work, and within some years, the empty town eventually becomes a little more noisy with people scattered around and buildings around. Pastry's father, Casserole, is a war hero. His father is interested in training him to become a warlord like him, so even when Pastry is just at the age of none, he has started training swords with his father. On this day, he stands by the tree, training with his father. His father tells him that he keeps getting distracted as he trains and should try to hold the grip of his sword better so he can tackle better. He has the swords as he keeps fighting against Casserole and explaining his new life. It's been 9 years in this new life, and he can attest to it that his life is awesome. He has a very caring father and mother. He is the last born of the family, and he has 5 elder sisters. They treat him with joy and happiness. Indeed, he enjoys that love, except for the fact that the fief they live in can only germinate wheat, and they can't even grow beans or anything that he could use to make sweet. He misses making sweets, and he can't imagine his life without making sweets. He remembers his life of sweet making, and he thinks about his old life. He gets distracted, and Casserole hits him and falls on his sword. His sword falls behind him, and he collapses in front of his father, admitting that he has lost the fight. Although his father wants them to continue the duel, one of the members of the community who also doubles as his father's retainer, Fuel, comes to meet them and calls out for Casserole. Fuel goes there and tells them that it is almost time for their meal so they can pack up the training and go to eat. Casserole tells Pastry that he should leave for the day and go to rest. He asks Fuel what he has come to meet him for, and Fuel tells him that he has 2 pieces of news. The first one is good news while the second one is a bad news, so Casserole should choose the news he wants to hear first. Casserole admits that he would have to hear the 2 pieces of news regardless, so it is better he starts with the good one. Fuel starts with the good news and tells him that their beans cultivation is growing so well, and they have a very good harvest that year. While they are happy about it, he admits that the good result is only because they took to Pastry's advice when he told them that they should put limes on their beans cultivation, and the cultivation will breed a good harvest. Fuel asks Pastry where he gets his good suggestions from, and as Pastry tries to imagine how he could use the beans, he says that they could use the beans to make sweets items, and he even starts listing out the supposed processes. The adults look at him weirdly, asking him what he is saying and where he has heard all those things from. He can't tell them that he is reincarnating, so he tells them that he is only daydreaming. They comment that his daydreams most times are always absurd. After that, Casserole recalls that Fuel has a second piece of news. He asks him what the bad news is, and Fuel tells him that the bad news is that the bandits that had attacked the kingdom of Rites weren't defeated, and the bandits are on their way to their city. Bandits attacking their fief means one thing, which is the fact that the bandits will destroy their entire fields and they will steal their harvest too. Pastry is more affected because his dream of creating sweets in that world is just coming to a realization, and he feels he wouldn't allow anyone to destroy his dreams at all. Fuel tells them that the bandits are about 50 and they will reach the city in about 2 months. He claims the only way their city can survive that attack is to plan toward it. That seems impossible to Pastry because if they gather all the men in their city and even in the neighboring towns, they will barely see 30 men. So the idea is dead on arrival because there is no way the 30 men they find can defeat the 50 fully equipped bandits. Casserole also starts looking for a solution. He goes to the canal and suggests that they lay an ambush for the bandits before they arrive, and they will also try to get reinforcement from the Kingdom of Rites. That seems like a more possible idea, but the Kingdom of Rites will never help them. The reason is that their inability to defeat the bandits has already made them weak, and if the members of that small community succeed in defeating the bandits instead of the big kingdom, it will be a bad name to the king. It will destroy his reputation, so the king will also wish that they lose in the fight, and they can call for help from the bigger kingdoms. Casserole also figures that Fuel, while trying to find a solution, says the only solution is to use Pastry. He means they should have Pastry's sanctification. Casserole sees it could be a way out, so he accepts. He gets home and tells Agnes and his daughter, Josephine, that he is scheduling Pastry's sanctification for the next week. Agnes refuses immediately, but her husband convinces her that it is just for the best of their city and family, so she accepts. Naturally, sanctification is done for kids between the age of 13 to 15, and Pastry is too young, although Pastry wants it to be, but he understands the reason his mother is against it. Agnes accepts to start the preparation, and she asks for Josephine's help. They both give a very happy smile at the suggestion, and Pastry understands what that means and knows it's not a good idea. They start dressing Pastry up for the preparation and start by giving him feminine clothes. They laugh that the clothes are good on him, and they also bring out makeup to use on him. Since he was a kid, his sisters and mother have treated him like a dress-up doll. They would dress him in a feminine manner, and they would also make him use their jewelry and makeup. He really can't complain because his father doesn't interfere, and it was much worse than that when his other sisters were around. He hopes and prays that he will become an adult soon and get out of those stress. On the day he is traveling for his sanctification ceremony, he goes to the field with his father, who asks him why he is looking that tired on the day he is traveling. He reminds Casserole that he has been working for the past few days, but Casserole laughs at him. Agnes and Josephine also arrive, and before he leaves, the other kids at the village come to bid him goodbye. They disappear from there, and they appear in the kingdom of Bovaldia. That is the first time he sees a kingdom as large as that, and the first place and they go is the marketplace. He sees several candies and sweet items. He doesn't know that things like that also exist in that world because he hasn't seen them before. He screams that he wants them, and his father promises him that if he passes his sanctification process, he will allow him to choose whatever he wants in the market. Pastry starts thinking of the exact thing he wants in the market, and suddenly, his eyes catch something he couldn't have expected to see there. He sees apples. He is so excited that he jumps to the stall. His father tells him they are bonkas, and they are very rare in their city because it is cultivated in the north. Pastry tells his father that they should buy some on their way home, and he can grow it in their city. Casserole is so excited about his son's intelligence. He hopes that with Pastry's intelligence, he will make the city of Mordon a big city and also control several knights. On the other hand, Pastry dreams that he can bake his apple, make apple pies, create honey through bees, and make a very sweet world. They arrive at the church for his sanctification. Casserole tells the priest about it, but the priest feels Pastry is too small. They start the process regardless. At home, Josephine asks Fuel what true sanctification is about, and Fuel lectures her that it is a process where they find out the number of magic values in a child. For the process, they will lock the child in a dark, empty room until they can see how much he can endure. The rationale is that magic only appears when someone is without help, and he will be able to use his magic in that situation. They lock Pastry for a day and a half, but the priest says he can still endure until the process ends. He claims he is shocked that Pastry could endure that much. Pastry is thinking about sweets, and he doesn't know anything until his father calls to wake him up after 2 days. The priest tells Pastry that he has tried and he has to seal the process with the scripture. As the priest reads out the scripture, Pastry sees himself entering a trance, and they can all see the spiritual baubles around him. After he finishes, the priest admits that Pastry has much magical power. Casserole gives the priest some coins and leaves. He goes to the market where they buy apples, and after buying enough, the merchant gives them 2 as gifts. He sits to eat it with his father and tells his father that they shouldn't tell his mother and Josephine that they ate the best of the apples. On the other hand, the priest checks the coins and says it's not enough for him to keep his mouth shut, and he will reveal what Casserole had come to the church for. The group of bandits raise the village in flames and gathers their loot at the center of the burning village, looking quite content at what they managed to gather. Meanwhile, while Casserole inspects the fortification process over at his end, one of his men informs him that the bandits have already started to make their move, and they have attacked and burnt down a village in Liptaver, which is close to his territory. This news greatly disturbs Casserole because he only just arrived from the capital 3 weeks ago to commence the fortification process of the village. The fact that they've already gotten to the Liptaver domain means that they have to hasten preparations because they can no longer work with the 2 weeks deadline they are supposed to use to prepare for possible bandit attacks. Immediately, Pass is given a message of summons to various village leaders, as well as Cointro and Glackage, who are to gather for an urgent meeting at once. While he sets out to deliver the message, he worries that the bandits' insistent attacks would become a stumbling block towards his dream of creating a land filled with awesome delicacies. He hopes that his dad succeed in his plans to protect the village with so little manpower at his disposal. At the same time, Casserole orders the smaller villagers under him to fill their wells with sand and evacuate their homes immediately. Everyone hastily moves to the main village, where he uses the opportunity to separate the able-bodied men who can fight, as well as the farmers who he orders to fill their storage houses with as much food as possible. He makes sure that everyone is given a duty, and while this is going on, Fuel informs him that the supplies would only last for 3 days at best, and suggests that they might have to take their chances by reducing the rations. Pass watches worriedly as the only weapon makers they have work on their craft at such a slow pace. Given their age and pace, he worries that the men won't be able to keep up with a prolonged battle with the bandits. While he brainstorms for a way to help his dad out, he is joined by Mark and Lumi, his self-proclaimed lieutenants who have come to assist him. They tell him to instruct them on what need to be done, since they are supposed to work for him just like their fathers are working for his dad, who has the title of the village suzerain. The thought of having retainers at his age makes him uncomfortable, so he tells them both to behave like the normal childhood friends that they are to him rather than treating him like a noble. He wishes he could just goof around with the other village kids like they usually do, but the menace of ravaging bandits have ruined their simple lifestyle. He then asks the pair to gather a bunch of small rocks that can be tossed by kids their age. Although they have no idea what he plans to do with the rocks, they obey his instructions nevertheless. While they are at it, he also reminds them to be conscious of their surroundings and head back to the village the moment they notice anything out of the ordinary. The pair then begin their task of hurling rocks with a basket behind their backs. While they pick the rocks into the baskets, Lumi asks Mark if he knows what kind of magic Pass ended up with. Mark tells her Pass is keeping his magic a secret because he is still practicing how to use it. Lumi thinks it has to be something awesome for Pass to keep as a secret, but Mark argues that he is still the best when it comes to pure physical brawls, and he is not the less intimidated. Just then, Mark hears a sound coming from deep within the forest. At first, Lumi thinks he's trying to prank her. However, after listening intently, they become certain that the bandits are marching towards the village. He immediately head back to the village and inform the men at the gate, who move to remove the bridge in front of the entrance and lock the gate. With the bandits' imminent arrival, everyone who were previously calm suddenly become anxious and doubtful if they would be able to actually fight against the notorious bandits who have already burned down towns of villages along the way. Just then, Casserole arrives to put their MNDS at ease. He tells them that they must not let the bandits into the village, because that would mean their wives and kids would be killed, their properties stolen, and their holes burnt. He informs them of his resolve to protect the village and urges the men to dedicate their hearts to protect their family. With this speech, he manages to give the men courage, and they immediately move to their various positions while they await the bandits. Fuel suggests that the bandits might wait till daybreak to attack, since they don't know the area very well, and would be at a disadvantage at night. However, Casserole tells him they would definitely attack because the other territories they've raided won't have enough food to sustain their massive troop. He suggests that they must be low on food and strongly believes they won't spare a moment before they attack the village. Despite his explanation, Fuel still thinks that it might be a wrong move to keep the townsfolk awake all through the night, because it'll certainly put them at a massive disadvantage if the bandits decide to wait out the night and attack the next morning. Casserole then asks his smart son, Pasco, his opinion on the matter, but he tells them that they have too little information about the bandits to make assumptions. He explains that they'll need to check how much supplies they have, as well as their numbers, as that would be the only way to determine her course of action, just as it is with preparing to feed a large amount of people. He gets carried away thinking about the matter and trying to solve it the way he does in his previous life. But by the time he comes back to his senses, Casserole has already decided on his next plan of action. He takes Fuel along with him to check out the enemy base and ascertain the might of their forces. He leaves Pass in charge of the village and heads out to investigate, immediately knowing full well the risk involved. Once he's gone, Pass tells Mark to pass a message to the northern gate that they are to use flame arrows to signal the enemy's arrival. He also instructs Lumi to tell the craftsmen to prepare the flames and arrows to be used when the time comes. He also informs the pair that the arrows serve a dual purpose of helping his dad find his way back to the village should they lose their way during a night chase by the bandits. Mark suggests that he could just use his teleportation spells, but Pass tells him he won't be able to take Fuel and the horses with him because of the weight limit. Back inside the village, Pass finds some kind scared and thus firms his resolve to protect them in place of his father the suzerain no matter what happens. Meanwhile, Casserole and Fuel begin their investigation in the forest. He uses his magic to observe the enemy base from a distance. He finds out the bandits aren't just regular guys but ex-military soldiers with 5 good horses. He also finds out that they bandits number up to 70 in total, which makes Casserole conclude that they must be professionals. He also reports that the bandits have taken a number of villagers hostage and surmises that they plan to sell them into slavery. Once they finish up with their investigation, they hurriedly set out to the enemy base for a surprise attack. Over at the bandits' base, the minions report to their boss that the neighboring villages have been deserted by its occupants. As they prepare to move over to the main village, Casserole and his trusty right-hand man show up out of nowhere and begin slaying the bandits. The focus on the killing the weaklings while they hurriedly make their way past them. The leader tries to instruct his men to be wary of the horses, however, by the time they can stay in formation, they've already lost some of their men. The Lord decides it'll be too risky to make another charge now that they are organized, so he instructs Fuel to make a retreat back to the village. The men immediately chase after them even when their leader tries to make them stop. With this plan, they manage to separate some of the bandits from the main group. Over at the village, an arrow is shot immediately they notice their arrival from a distance. Fuel thinks that Pass must have set a trap since he ordered the guards to shoot him arrow. Although they have no idea what his plan is, they decide to pass through another route back to the village. When Pass is notified of the incoming enemies, he musters his kid troops who immediately start raining stones down the path with slings. They set the stones on fire for added damage, and this move manages to halt the pursuit of the bandits thanks to Pass's brilliant plan. They continue to rain down flaming stones on the bandits who are struggling to pinpoint where the attack is coming from. Casserole and Fuel then use the opportunity to charge at the bandits while they are confused. When the leader catches up to them, he decides to head directly to the gate to stop the attack. He dashes from the cliff without a bridge and manages to land on the edge of the other side. Since he managed to make it in one piece, his men also rally behind him ready to jump. At the same time, the villagers at the gate try to attack with the tools, but he simply dodges their attack while he makes his way above the wall. He succeeds in getting through the wall and immediately starts slaying the weak villagers one after the other in an angry frenzy. A warrior immediately comes to face him in a duel while the kids hold back the other bandits who manage to make it past the wall. When he notices THR and Kifs are the real problem, he rushes towards them to solve the problem. He swings his sword at them, but they are shielded by Pass, who ends up injured. The leader immediately takes Pass hostage with his sword on his neck, and this makes the other fighters hesitant to approach him. While everyone is distracted, Pass notices a man who is in severe pains and uses his magic to replicate the man's injuries on the other bandits. They all start screaming in pain with no idea of what hit them, and while the leader struggles to understand Pass's magic, a kid knocks him unconscious with a stone to the head. The town looks tattered with axes and swords because of the bandits' attack. Fortunately for them, with the aid of their very intelligent lord and his son, they win the fight. Casserole sends one of his villagers to inform his wife that they have won the fight. The man gets there, and even before he talks, Agnes asks him if they have won. He tells her that the fight has ended, and just as she expects, they have won. He tells her they have even captured some of the bandits in their prison. She is so glad about that, and she asks if her husband and son are both uninjured. The man tells her that Casserole is uninjured and fine, but Pastry took an axe on his arm, so he is a little injured. Agnes collapses on the floor immediately. Josephine tells her that she doesn't have to worry, and she is very sure that the injury Pastry has gotten isn't too deep, and the young boy will be fine. She asks the messenger how deep Pastry's injury is, and just as Josephine has suggested, the messenger tells her that his injury is minor, and he will be better anytime soon. Agnes is glad, and Josephine shows her concerns because she thinks her father and brother will also hope that they are doing fine too. Agnes asks when her husband will come home. Pastry, on the other hand, is coordinating the rewards for the neighboring villages that have aided them in the fight. He takes them to their rice barn and tells them that it is the remainder of the war, and they should all share it and take it back to their village. They are all happy with suzerain's kind gesture, and they enter the barn to take the rice. Pastry thinks about himself, reminding himself of his major intention to ensure he succeeds in building another sweet world since he cannot achieve his aim in his first life due to circumstances beyond his control. Later, Casserole coordinates how the bandits are tied and taken to the prison. He commands that the bandits should be spaced so they won't have any means to escape. As the bandits queue to the prison, their head looks around, looking for someone they could deceive to release them. Fuel asks Casserole if they will still send the bandits to the city of Rites, and Casserole says yes. He says that is the only way the king of the Rites can maintain his pride and not feel disappointed that he found it difficult to defeat the bandits that have attacked his city. Fuel also asks him what they will get in return for the favor, and he says they will have to discuss what will be profitable. They take all the bandits to the prison and tie them to the woods around them, and also put security at the gate to secure the bandits and ensure they don't escape. As it is known that rewards are the greatest motivation to do something, Casserole decides to reward everyone who has contributed one way or the other towards the win. He calls the villagers together and calls the first person Glackage. He gives Glackage his rewards and also calls the two little kids, Mark and Lumi, who have helped Pastry in laying the first ambush in the war. The kids move forward, although they wonder why Casserole has called them together and not separately. Casserole tells them he is proud of them and that they will be a great addition to society. As a reward for their great work, he gives them a sword and barley barn. The kids are so excited. They struggle to carry their gifts home, and on their way, Mark asks Lumi if he knew they would be so great during the battle. They are also so proud of themselves, and they are happy that they have gotten swords for themselves. They hope that one day they will grow up to be helpful to the next lord of their city, Pastry. They wish to become Pastry's retainers in the future and help him tremendously. Pastry passes around them, and he sees them struggling to carry their gifts. He goes to help them carry it, and they all lift it to Mark's house. Mark enters the house happily and screams to tell his family that he did so well during the war that the Lord rewarded him with a sword and grains. His mother is more excited that he has returned home alive from that scary battle. She hugs him passionately and tells him she is really scared on his behalf. His sister is also happy. They say they are proud of him, and they know he will do so well. His mother tells him she is proud of him, and she also asks Pastry if her son wasn't in much trouble during the fight. Pastry tells her that Mark was diligent and he was part of the reasons they won the fight, which makes his mother more proud of him. They need to go to Lumi's house too, so they leave Mark's house. When they arrive at Lumi's house, her grandfather hugs her so passionately that she almost squeezes her out of her clothes. She screams at her grandfather that he is squeezing her out. She shows her grandfather the rewards she got from the battles, and her grandfather is so excited and happy for her. He tells her he knows that she is a diligent child, and he knows she wouldn't have disappointed them. Her grandfather also greets Pastry. Later, the men in the village decide to celebrate their win. They come to Lumi's house with their wines and alcohol. As they enter the house, they ask Lumi if her father is back home, but he tells them her father has gone to meet Mark's father, and he says that he has something important to do there. The men decide that his absence if her father wouldn't stop them from enjoying themselves in celebration of their win. They enter the house and they start serving the wine. They notice that Pastry is also there, and they ask him to also join them in the celebration. Mark asks the adults to give them alcohol, too, but they refuse, saying that the little ones would only take milk. They serve the kids milk and the adults drinks. They all drink, and as the men say they were shocked when they witnessed the first ambush led by Pastry with the little kids, They say that the ambush was coordinated and one of the reasons they could win the fight. They say they never thought Mark and Lumi, no nuisance in the community, could be that useful during the battle and say that their city will be in great hands in the future. On the other hand, Pastry is thinking about his apple pie which he has decided that he is going to make. He thinks of all his ingredients and how he will get them in that city, including cinnamon. Mark and Lumi also leave the adults. They go outside to play. And Mark says he never thought there would be a day when the adults would commend them that much and says all they have been used to is insults and abuse because of their attitude, so hearing little compliments here and there isn't a bad idea. Lumi tells him that he is the only one that is a nuisance and not her. As they play and talk, Mark asks Lumi if he knows where the bandits are kept, and Lumi tells him they are in prison. Mark says that as the future retainers of the kingdom, the responsibility of guarding the prisoners should be their own, so they should go and check up on the prisoners. Lumi also agrees with him, and they leave for the prison. At the prison, they meet the guards, and they try to convince the guards to allow them in. The guards refuse, and they angrily leave. As Lumi leaves peacefully, Mark drags her back, saying he has a suggestion. He takes some stones from the floor and throws them toward the other side of the prison. The guards hear the sounds and assume something is wrong, so they go to leave there. As they leave, Mark and Lumi enter the prison. They walk around and see the bandit's head, who speaks to Mark. He asks him if he is the sword's owner by his side, and Mark tells him the sword was given to him as a reward. The bandit tells Mark that the sword belongs to him, and he knows that he will die soon and be beheaded, so before he dies, he would like to do a good deed by teaching Mark how to use the sword. Lumi begs Mark not to listen to the man, but Mark refuses and brings out the sword. The bandit tells him that if he teaches him how to use it, he can use magic. Mark is so excited about that because he wants to use magic like Pastry. The man tells there is a chant that should be said on the sword to bring out the magic, and no other person can hear it, so Mark should come nearer. Before Mark gets there, the man loses his rope and he kicks Mark. He takes the sword and hits Lumi with it. Lumi falls and starts bleeding. The guards return, and the man holds Mark at ransom, saying he will kill him if they come near him. Another villager reports the incident to the other villagers, who come there immediately. The bandit takes a horse and climbs on it with Mark in his hand and rides away. Pastry arrives. He enters the prison and sees injured Lumi. He tells them to treat her and says they should ensure they stop the injury without considering the scar it will show on her body. He goes out and asks the men where the bandit has passed. They tell him he has gone toward the east, and Pastry takes the horse to follow him. On his way, he thinks that the trap they have left around the east is still there and says that if the trap stops the bandit, he will try to take a small injury to replicate the injury on the bandit. News of what has happened gets to Casserole. He asks where his son is, and they tell him that Pastry has followed the bandit. He immediately stands up to chase them, but Fuel tells him to stop and says he will go instead. Fuel insists that if the people hear that a bandit has escaped, they will be anxious and afraid, and it is Casserole's role to keep them calm, and he can only do that if he is there. Fuel asks for another villager, and they search for the two boys. Indeed, the bandit's horse falls when he steps on the trap. As he falls, Pastry arrives, and Mark runs behind Pastry. Pastry brings out his sword, and the bandit asks why he is always disturbing his plans. He asks if it is also Pastry that put the trap there. He wonders if Pastry wants to fight him, and he goes to fight. The fight is tough because the bandit knows Pastry can replicate any wound, so he plans to kill Pastry with a single strike. As the fight gets tougher, Mark tells Pastry to leave and that his life isn't worth it, but Pastry reminds him that he is his lieutenant and must be alive. The bandit breaks Pastry's sword and attempts to hit Pastry, and Pastry screams. Fuel arrives and can't find the boys. He sees Pastry's broken sword, assumes the boy is dead, and takes the sword to break the bad news to Casserole and Agnes, only to see Pastry at home sitting on Agnes's leg. He is shocked because he couldn't have missed Pastry on the way. He asks Casserole how Pastry could have gotten home that early, reluctantly. Pastry confesses that he replicated his father's teleportation skills. Casserole warns him never to use the skills in front of anyone again, and that he shouldn't use magic in battles because although he is lucky that time, he may teleport under a rock next time. He meets with Fuel expressing his concerns that the bandit may reveal what he has seen Pastry use, and if others know Pastry can recreate people's magic, they will take him as a threat. The following day, Mark sits sadly. Pastry comes to meet him, asking if he wants to visit Lumi, but Mark says he feels ashamed. Pastry tells him all he has to do is say sorry, so they go there together. Pastry goes to the kitchen to make banka pie while Mark apologizes to Lumi, who forgives him immediately and says it's not his fault. Pastry brings the pie, and they enjoy it. He gives them a sour banka, and they scream that it is sour. He explains to them that bonkas can be sour or sweet, and it takes a special skill to mix it perfectly. He tells Mark that just like Bonka, he also has his excellent skill and he should find it if he wants to be his lieutenant. Mark appreciates him. Later, Glackage, Lumi's father, arrives and gets angry at Mark for injuring his daughter. He says Mark has to marry Lumi because of that, and they all laugh and eat the bonka pie. Seeing how happy they are, Pastry determines that he will make people more happy by creating a sweet land. In the end, the Princess of Rites finds out that the people of Mordonfield defeated the bandits and says it will be a difficult negotiation. Pastry and Fuel meet with Casserole to talk about the city's affairs. The first thing Casserole says immediately after he checks the paper in his hand is the fact that they have no money. They tell him that they all know their city is short on funds, and that is even the reason why they are in his office, so they can all discuss what can be the solution to the problem they are going through. Pastry narrates that it has been challenging for their city to overcome the bandits' attack. For a city that depends on fields like theirs, the bandits' attack can be challenging to get over because, during the attack, several of their areas were destroyed. Their houses were broken down, and even their wells were closed down to start again after going through that turns out to be very difficult. It is not helpful for them at all. At that moment, all they are doing is rebuilding the destroyed properties. They try to remove the rocks that have been kept inside the wells and also try to manage the remaining food that is at their disposal so everyone can get something to eat. There is a need for them to discuss where they can get their subsequent funding seems to be impossible for them. Casserole asks them what they think they can do, but they also say they don't have anything they can do. He asks if they can borrow money from another fief, but Fuel tells him that there is no way they can get anything from the other fief. And in fact, there is no fief that had recovered from the attack, and the other fields are even trying to lend money from them. All the towns around them are affected by what happened, and they need to get funding if they don't want their city to go down the drains. Casserole suggests they could also lend money from the Council of Chiefs, but Fuel refuses. He reminds him that lending money from the Council of Chiefs will be putting them much damage because the interest the Council of Chiefs will take from them will be more than they can pay back. They keep bringing up more suggestions until Pastry adds that, if possible, they can also get Casserole's parents to lend them money. Casserole reveals to his son that his parents can't lend them money. He says that he has cut all his links with his parents for a long time, and he and his wife Agnes do not have any relationship with their parents. He tells Pastry that his parents aren't even interested in meeting their grandkids, let alone lending them money. While explaining what had happened, he tells Pastry that when he and Agnes decided to get married, their fief was barren, and everyone thought nothing good would come out of it. As a result, everyone frowns against the relationship, and they insist that they can't get married. However, the kids were in love, so they decided to elope, contrary to what their parents wanted. Fuel adds that it is a classical love story, one that everyone would like to hear and one that he would like to experience. Pastry figures that considering that the period they are in is one that parents prefer to matchmake their kids, there is no way his grandparents will be happy with what their kids have done, which leaves him with another worry about where they will get funding. Later that day, he meets Lumi and Mark. Mark asks him what he and the adults have been saying in the meetings and says that Pastry should stop hiding information about the city from them because they are also one of the decision makers. Lumi laughs at Mark because he makes a mistake in his pronunciation, and after they make jests, Pastry asks Lumi if she is now feeling better and is allowed to come out already. She tells Pastry that her father and grandfather had allowed her to go outside. She says that she is better already, and she even tries to hit herself to prove that she is better, but she feels pain, so she tells them that her injury is still painful, although manageable. Pastry tells them that the issue they are dealing with at the Lord's house is where they will get funds to continue running the village. He says that they need to start farming back, and they need money. Lumi suggests that they could increase their field. While that seems like a good idea, Pastry is of the opinion that it would be impossible because it would take time, manpower, and, most importantly, money, which is precisely what they don't have. The kids insist they are going to help the city in finding a solution, and they also start giving suggestions. Mark says that Pastry trains them in magic. Lumi laughs at him, asking him what he will do if they teach him magic. She calls him stupid, telling him that even if he is trained on how to fight, he is too stupid that he won't understand how to fight, and even if he understands how to fight, he will use it against himself instead of against his enemies. She tells him that if he learns how to use fire magic, he will use it to injure himself and burn himself instead of using it against his enemies. Mark angrily shouts at her, and they start to argue, but Pastry stops them, telling them they should stop flirting, and Mark tells him they aren't. They concentrate on the exact thing they are looking for, which is how to get money. Lumi suggests that they can use the bonka pie pastry made for them to make money. She admits that the pie is very delicious, and if they sell them, it could make money. Pastry thinks about the time he was making the bonka pie. He knows how much he enjoys creating desserts for the world, but says that he doesn't think that is a good idea because to do that, they would have to get a lot of bonka, which would cost them money, which is the resources they don't have. He also says they are looking for ways to make money and not to make desserts. Lumi brings another suggestion. She says that they could use the magic pastry does to make money. She asks him to show them one of his magic skills, and he wonders if she hasn't seen him do magic before. He decides to do just as she asked, and he tells them to draw anything they want to see on the floor. Mark proceeds to draw something very unfamiliar. They ask him what he is trying to achieve, and he says he has drawn a dragon, and he has also drawn that he killed the dragon himself. Looking at the picture, Pastry thinks he could have assumed Mark drew a worm with legs. On the other hand, Lumi tells them she has drawn a bonka. She draws another picture, and when they ask her, she says it is a bonka pie. Mark laughs at her, asking her if that is what a bonka pie looks like, and again, they get into an argument, and she says that what he has drawn is even worse than what she has drawn. Pastry settles their arguments again, and he invokes his magic. He puts the drawing they have both drawn on the floor to the back of their hands, and he tells them to check it. They are so shocked. Lumi tries to clean it, but it doesn't clean, showing that it is semi-permanent. She asks him if the drawing can clean, and he tells her it will peel off in 3 days. She says it is a very easy way to make money and asks him if he could use the same magic to draw something on a plank of wood or plank, like recreate something wherever he wants. Immediately she says that it triggers something in Pastry, and he realizes they could use the skill to make money. He holds her and tells her she is very smart, but she withdraws, asking him what he is doing. Before they could ask what was wrong with him, he ran away. He goes home. At home, Casserole has called Agnes to ask her if it is possible that she could get them some funds from her parents. She realizes that they are having issues but reminds him that there is no way her parents will accept to give her some money. He admits that she is right and he shouldn't have bothered her. Pastry immediately enters and tells the adults he has seen a way to make money. He holds wood and reminds his father that he wants to marry Josephine. He asks Casserole how he intends to get a man for Casserole and replies that Casserole has teleportation magic. He can teleport from one place to another and take Josephine along so they can find a suitor. He asks Casserole how nobles who do not have teleportation magic find suitors for their kids. Casserole replies that they have to travel to the royal capital and attend the ball, and traveling is a lot of money, so they get to spend a lot, and they are even at the risk of being attacked by monsters on the way, so it is a difficult journey. Pastry tells them he has found a solution. He uses his magic and draws Agnes on the piece of wood with him. He shows his parents if nobles can buy such drawings to show potential suitors what their daughters look like. The drawing looks precisely like Agnes, and everyone is shocked. When they look at the picture well, Pastry tells them he wants to name it Matchmaking Photos, and when they are trying to pitch it to other nobles, they will tell them the photo saves them from the stress of traveling with their kids to other cities to find a match for their daughters. When Casserole looks at the picture, he admits they could sell it for a few gold coins, and since it is magic and not painting, they don't need to buy materials to get it done, so it is profitable. Fuel is concerned that if they bring that product out, it may reveal the level of magic Pastry has. But Pastry claims there is no way people won't know that he can use magic, and they can actually claim that is the only type of magic he uses so they can conceal his other skill. They decide to do so, but their first plan is to meet with the Count of Rites to discuss their compensation and damages for fighting the bandits which the Kingdom of Rites has lost. Indeed, they travel to the Kingdom of Rites, a very big kingdom with the city of Ritesville as its headquarters. When they arrive at the castle of the Count, they introduce themselves, and the knights say they have been expecting them. The Count is worried that Casserole must have been coming to eat her raw, but she reassures herself that there is nothing a poor noble can do to her. They meet with the Count, who welcomes them. Casserole has told Pastry beforehand that the Count is Brioche Salgrade Mil Rites. She is the oldest daughter of the old Count, and the heir to the throne is young, so she is holding it on his behalf. Brioche welcomes them, and she asks if they will drink tea with her. She takes them to the table, where she gives them a cup of tea with several cookies. When Casserole drinks the tea, he really appreciates it because it is a well-known tea. But when Pastry drinks it and eats the cookies, he doesn't give that excited expression that she expects from him. She tells Casserole that she has heard a lot about how he had resurrected his dead fief, but Casserole says it is all because of his son's help. Brioche assumes he is trying to be humble. She speaks to Pastry, who says that the growth of their fief is attributed to his father, but all of their hard work had been destroyed because of the bandits, and they heard that the bandits had escaped from Rtes. He claims that he has brought some of the bandits so Brioche can interrogate them, and if Brioche denies that they aren't from her city, he can just take them to the royal capital and show the king. Brioche is shocked that she fell into the hands of a kid. She denies knowing about the bandits and claims the ones that attacked them were killed in the city, so there is no proof that the bandits came from her kingdom. Casserole reveals a sword that belongs to her family, which was found with the bandits. She realizes she is grounded and asks them for what they want. Pastry negotiates to get 150 gold coins, and she reluctantly gives it to them. After sealing the deal, she admits to Pastry that she underestimated his intelligence, and she fell into his prey. She admits defeat but asks him why he looked unsatisfied when he drank their tea. He tells her it is because the cookies accompanying the tea were equally sweet. He claims it is better if they make moderate cookies to it. He keeps talking, but his father shuts him up. As they are about to leave, he apologizes for not being a gift for her and draws her on a cloth as a gift. She loves the picture, and she accepts it excitedly. Duke Cattlesec, the leader of the royal capital's central army, welcomes Lord Mordeln with a bright smile on his face to the banquet. They congratulate him for his grandson's successful coming of age, but he tells them he still thinks of him as a kid despite how well he is growing. Lord Mordeln thanks him for specially inviting them to the banquet, which makes the old Duke laugh because he knows he's just being flattered by the Lord Mordeln, who is considered a hero in the kingdom. He then introduces his invitees to his grandson called Squall, and doesn't fail to boast that he graduated as the #1 in his class while he was in the officers' boarding school. Squall tries not to show how nervous he is when he salutes Lord Mordeln, but his shaky voice fails him terribly. While also saluting him in response, Lord Mordeln tells him that he should be the one nervous as he is low in rank compared to he and his father the Duke. This only makes him freak out the more, so his grandfather quickly cuts in, stating that Squall used to idolize him while he was growing up and that is the reason he is acting all weird. After a while, he finally decides to look in Pass's direction, who then introduces himself by kneeling formally while placing one of his hands on his chest as he tells them his name. The men are shocked at how formal he speaks despite his young, but he doesn't stop with a greeting and continues by first congratulating Squall on his coming of age before thanking them for giving him an audience. Squall tries to respond to him formally but ends up biting his tongue in the process, which makes the Duke burst into laughter while also congratulating Pass on his coming of age directly. Pass then reveals he was blessed with magic when he came of age, and this revelation draws everyone's attention because it is rare for a family such as theirs to be blessed with magic in successive generations. The Duke thinks it's because the gods must love their family. However, Pass tells him he believes it was merely a coincidence that he was granted the use of magic. The Duke then asks him to demonstrate his magic for all to see, so Pass starts by first requesting for a servant to hold out a white cloth. He then gathers mana from the surroundings, which he uses to cast a spell that creates a picture of a girl on the white cloth. Everyone is taken aback by the nature of the spell, most especially Squall, and this makes Pass gift the cloth to him on behalf of himself as well as Margrave Hubert. On hearing the name, the Duke notices that the guy is absent in the ceremony, so he quickly surmises that the picture must have something to do with him. Pass quickly cuts in and reveals that the girl in the picture is actually the third daughter of the Margrave who is absent. Lord Mordeln then explains that because of the constant border dispute in the Margrave's domain, he was tasked with making sure his cute daughter called Lady Petra is known far and wide. Their plan actually works because Squall is now greatly infatuated with Petra just by looking at her picture alone. Pass quickly uses the opportunity to inform him that Lady Petra's would also be hosting a party for her imminent coming of age, and they were told that Petra would love for Squall to be in attendance as an expression of friendship. The Duke quickly tries to decline the offer, but the love-struck Squall blindly agrees to attend without even consulting his guardian. The old man is smart enough to know that they're trying to arrange a marriage for him, however Squall is an idiot. The Duke now realizes Pass has something going for him and isn't by any means acting like a child because he single-handedly carried the whole conversation towards the direction he wanted. Squall, on the other hand, is eager to know the exact date of the party, but the Duke stops him to inquire how he intends to travel to the domain. Unfortunately for the old man, Pass already had a plan in motion which he then explains to them. He then tells the Duke that his father would gladly assist with his magic, and this move only further excites Squall, who jumps on the opportunity to experience Lord Mordeln's magic firsthand. He He quickly asks Lord Mordeln if he would be willing to help him out, and once that's settled, the Duke gives in and breathes a sigh of frustration that he lost the invisible battle of wits. Just then, Pass walks up to him to whisper into his ears that he thinks the Margrave has some kind of ulterior motive, which could be that he is tired of the persistent border feuds with his neighbors, and plans to use the Duke's powerful military force to scare away his competitors. And an arranged marriage between Lady Petra and his grandson seems to be the perfect means of accomplishing such a feat. Due to Pass's explanation, the Duke decides to announce that he would also be attending the said party because he is hopeful his grandson might get to meet the woman of his dreams. Some moments after the initial discussion, Squall meets with Pass to specially ask him to keep aside the honorifics and call him by his given name. He explains that he doesn't like formal stuff as they are weird to him, so Pass obliges and also requests that he simply call him Pastry or Pass for short. He then asks Pass what he thinks Lady Petra might like, such as flowers or a special kind of snack, which makes him think for a moment before revealing that it might be best to get her sweets because she seemed to like the cookies he made for her when they first met. Squall then asks if he knows how to make sweets, to which he responds that it's one of the things he loves the most in the world. He starts talking about a new recipe of pie he was experimenting on, but Squall quickly kills the topic and tells him to focus on their initial discussion. He apologizes for getting carried away, but Squall tells him it's not a problem as long as he can do him a favor. Pass tells him he'll do anything he asks, excitedly thinking it would probably be to make a bunch of sweets. However, he is disappointed when Squall starts talking about the portrait he made on the white cloth. He tells him he'd like for it to be altered, but Pass is confused as to what he means. He then goes straight to the point and tells him he wants it to be a little more sexual than it is. Later on at the village, where the reconstruction and provision distribution is still ongoing, Fuel tries to understand why Lord Mordeln is going out of his way to help enrich his subjects when he's not really obliged to do that much. He tells him he just doesn't want to see his subjects starve and thinks it is his responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. Just then, Pass walks in and asks if they were talking about sweets, to which they reply that he's wrong and should probably stop thinking about cooking all the time. He approaches them with some letters from Duke Cattlesec as well as one from Margrave Hubert. He quickly takes the two letters, and after a few minutes of intense anticipation, he smiles at them while announcing that they've acquired 20,000 silver coins in total. This means that Lady Petra and Lord Squall eventually got engaged, and it was thanks to their brilliant and well-planned efforts. Pass is just happy all the stress they went through scrutinizing the matchmaking photos with Margrave wasn't in vain in the end. The Lord tells Fuel that they would first receive an advance of 30 silver coins, which makes him happy, and even suggests that they could build an estate. Lord Mordeln quickly cuts in and explains that they shouldn't get their hopes up because the money is to set up adequate security to escort Lady Petra to and from her coming-of-age announcement, which is to be held at the capital. Although Pass doesn't quite get it, so Fuel points out that some people might not like the engagement between the two houses, and so they might plan to take desperate measures to make sure the engagement is cancelled. Fuel also notes that it's supposed to be impossible for the engagement to be made public since only a few people know about it. However, Lord Mordeln explains that the church has become a haven for obtaining information thanks to some officials who take bribes. He also explains that it would have been easy to protect Lady Petra using his teleportation spell. However, she has an entourage and guards which would prove difficult for him to handle, and so the best option would be for him to teleport her to the capital, and hire guards would keep her safe during her time there. Fuel thinks it might be a risky job because the enemy can infiltrate the guards he hires and cause havoc, but Lord Mordeln is adamant that they finish the job because their success would earn them the trust of two big players in the kingdom. Pass also agrees that they must take on the mission, but his reason isn't for the good of his dad's domain, but instead his plans to make delicacies all around the world. He suddenly gets an idea and suggests that it might be a wise decision to safeguard Lady Petra in the church because it has only one entrance, limited windows, and a sturdy structure that can withstand attacks. The two men buy the idea of keeping her in the sanctification sanctuary at the church, and they decide to use the brilliant idea as the core of their security plans. With that settled, Pass also hands the receipt of purchase from the merchant over to his dad before attempting to exit the room in haste. However, he is told to stop by his furious dad, who notices some extra items Pass must have chipped in without his permission. As punishment for his actions, he tells him there won't be any allowance for him for a while. Sometime later, Lord Mordeln and Pass meet up with Margrave Hubert, who has been waiting for them by a carriage. When he asks why he brought Pass along during such an important mission, Lord Mordeln tells him that it would be helpful for Lady Petra to have someone her age to talk to during the journey and her stay in the capital. Although this is just a cover-up because Pass is actually the mastermind of the operation. Both Margrave Hubert and Pass exchange pleasantries, and he doesn't fail to thank him for using his awesome magic to make the engagement possible. He then opens the carriage where Lady Petra and her attendants are already seated. She thanks Pass for the delicious cookies he made for her when they first met, which makes him extremely happy that she loved it. She tells him she has been dreaming of having another bite of the cookies and has been looking forward to their meeting ever since. Once inside, Pass tries to greet Lady Liko, but she barely responds to him, so Lady Petra scolds her for being a snub. As soon as everyone hops into the carriage, they begin their journey to the capital. On the way, Pass revises the plan in his head, which entails going to a church in the Margrave's domain, and from there, Lord Mordelm will teleport her to the capital, and once they touch down, they would also head to the church where she'll stay indoors in the sanctuary while secure the only entrance leading inside. Inside the carriage, Margrave Hubert reveals to Lord Mordelm that he's heard his enemies are also on the move. He tells him to make sure he protects his daughter, and so he reassures the Margrave that he has put adequate plans in place. Once they get to the church, the men are the first to come out to make sure it's safe. They stand guard beside the carriage door, and shortly after, some men spring up from the bushes to attack them. While they keep Lord Mordelm and the Margrave occupied, a third enemy goes to the carriage to assassinate Lady Petra. However, Pass blocks his strike with his own sword. He manages to stand his ground against the masked assassin, but when another one springs up from behind him, his dad arrives in time to protect him from the attack. Together, they manage to push the assassins back and give them a run for their money, after which they quickly head into the church. The two girls' faces are filled with terror as they descend down the basement of the church, but Liko is the one the incident hit the most, and so Pass decides to take her hand in hopes of setting her mind at ease. As they all journey to the royal capital for the sanctification ceremony, the girls are nervous and scared because of the narrow way they have passed. Licorice is much more scared than her sister, Petra. Pass walks up to her and holds her hand, encouraging her that she doesn't have to be scared, and says they are almost there. She looks at him joyfully and admits that he is much more mature for his age, and although she is the eldest among them, he is more mature than she is. She admits that he should be holding her sister instead of her, and she remembers that she had been very angry at everyone, including her parents, because she feels they could have matched her for that marriage instead of her sister. She recalls that she had also been very rude to Pass before. She feels she must have done badly, and she needs to do better. Irrespective of that, Pass takes her hands and walks her towards the last part of the tunnel, where they eventually see a door. They ask him if they will start the sanctification immediately, but he tells them that the sanctification is usually done at the royal capital, where the temple is. He further explains that the priest does the sanctification at the royal capital, so now they have to use his father's teleportation skills to get themselves to the royal capital. They don't understand what he means, but he opens the door before them and tells them they should all hold each other. While everyone holds hands, the maid among them, Kara, is reluctant to join them in holding hands due to the social differences, but Licorice tells her to bring her hands, and they hold hands together. After they hold hands, Pass joins them, and Casserole gathers all the mana around the universe together to get them to teleport. They indeed teleport, and they find themselves at the royal capital. As they arrive, Pass welcomes the girls to the royal capital. He tells them they are at the temple, and that is where the sanctification will take place, and he reassures them to be calm because everything will go as had been planned. They had prior felt there would be a lot of people who would be against a union of the family of a Margrave and a Duke, and it turns out they aren't wrong. Indeed, a man who heads the family of Armire calls a team of bandits because he wants to destroy the union. Before telling them about their awful mission, he tries to blow their bluff by telling them the mission would help them elevate the family of Armire. It was later found out that Armire has lost his noble ship, and he is struggling and trying to get it back and wants to use the Union to get his shine and get back his noble title. As he tries to tell them about the mission, he claims it will not only elevate their family but will even help him humiliate other families who had humiliated him. The family he is referring to is none other than the family of Cattlesec. The men tell him to go straight to the point and not try to wind them with unnecessary details. They ask him who he wants them to kill, telling him that they are capable and they will do what he wants. He tells them he doesn't want them to kill anyone, and he has no intention to kill. Instead, he wants them to help him kidnap a girl and tells them that if they do that, they will get 10 gold coins. 10 gold coins are too crazy just to kidnap a girl. They feel weird about the work and ask for further details to know if he isn't trying to use them so he can kidnap a noblewoman for himself as a wife. He admits that he indeed wants to kidnap a noblewoman but not as a wife. He tells them there is a lady, Petra Miller Hubert, the daughter of Margrave Hubert, who is having her sanctification ceremony soon at the royal capital, and she will be getting married to the grandson of Duke Cattlesec. He admits that successfully kidnapping her will be embarrassing to the family of Cattlesec, which means he will get his revenge on the family and, most likely, get his honor back. He begs them that the mission is very important and they should reach it with great caution because it must be successful. The leader of the team tells him that they know their duty, and they will surely do their work. As they are about to leave his room, he tries to call them back in a very unworthy manner, and the boss asks him who he is speaking to in such a manner. He watches them as they leave, and he comments that they are filthy. Well, I wonder why he couldn't say that in their presence. As they get outside, one of the team members asks his boss if he wants them to take the job. He says that the job looks weird, and he really can't clock out what Armire wants to gain from such a kidnap. Their boss explains to them that the job is quite important. Armire seeks to get two things. The first thing is that kidnapping the granddaughter-in-law of Duke Cattlesec, who leads and heads a fleet of army successfully, will be nothing but a disgrace to the family, so Duke Cattlesec would not allow them. But if it is achieved, it means Armire will gain another thing. He claims he feels Armire wants to hold the girl captive so that when everyone starts looking for the girl with their capacity to curry favor from the Margrave family, he will bring out the girl and make himself look like the savior that had saved the girl from her captive. That way, he would gain his honor back and most likely gain his noble title, and he will also use that opportunity to get the lady to fall in love with him and most likely marry the girl. The boss concludes his fantasy story by admitting that the story of a hero falling in love with his victim is a love story that is always amazing to the ears. They get to their business immediately. On the other hand, the temple is filled with multiple people. Several warriors try to get to the front line so they will be noticed. Pass wonders why that is happening, and he asks Casserole, who tells him that the Union is very powerful and is second to none. It will give the family more power in the city, and several other families want to tap into it and get into their good books. Pass comments that if it were to be their family, they would most likely find anyone by their side, and his father asks him why he had to spell that out to his ears when they both know it. Petra looks so disturbed and tired. Licorice tries to speak to her, asking her if she is fine, and she says she is only nervous. Pass walks into that conversation and tells them that she has every reason to be nervous, but she should be calm because when she eventually meets her fiancé, she will realize the whole process is worth it. And her fiancé, Squall, is a very calm young man and he is truly in love with her so she doesn't have to worry. She admits that she has also seen the portrait of Squall that Pass has drew and says that Squall looks so handsome and he looks like a real nobleman. She says she can't wait to see him and is very excited. That statement alone makes Pass very excited. He is glad that the entire stress and process which he and his parents has kept into planning that union didn't go to waste. He admits that, indeed, effective planning and preparation will always lead to positive results. He thinks further about it and realizes that even when he was a baker and lover of sweets, he had learned that if he doesn't put proper planning into the things he wants to do, he may not be successful. When he hears the voice of Margrave Hubert calling out for Petra and telling her that it is time for her sanctification, he comes back from his thoughts and concentrates on the job he is there for at the moment. Petra follows her father to the inner part of the temple, leaving Licorice with their maid, Kara, and Fuel enters the room with another man. He tells Casserole that he is just coming from the house of Duke Cattlesec. They ask him how things are in the house of Cattlesec, and he tells them that the house is filled with many people. He admits that several well-wishes are there, and there are also lords of minor fiefs like theirs. He wonders why that is the case, and Casserole gives him the same explanation he had given Pass earlier regarding how important the union is and how all the fiefs lord are trying to curry favor. Fuel tells them that he had left a member of their community, Contro, there to check out what is going on and give them an update later. Casserole tells Pass that he needs him to do him a favor. He points at Licorice and tells Pass that Petra's sanctification process will take a long while, and it is obvious that Licorice is tired of standing there. He asks Petra to take Licorice to the guest room so she can rest, and he should also help her get used to the area better and keep her company. He sees that he doesn't even notice she is bored, so he goes to meet her. He tells her Petra's process will take a while and asks if she would like to rest at the guest house. She goes with him, and Fuel tells him he should ensure they have a good time. Casserole tells Fuel to stop putting bad thoughts in his son's mind. By the way, who else feels there is chemistry between Pass and Licorice? Let me know in the comments section. Armire walks around his home, hoping and thinking about how miserable he will make the Cattlesec. After Petra finishes her sanctification, General Cattlesec sends a senior officer from his house, Venhen, to the temple to fetch Petra. He tells Casserole that he has been sent to get the girl for her engagement, and he takes her. After he leaves, Fuel asks Casserole if they are done with that part, and Casserole tells him that the next thing is getting them home after the engagement. Fuel says he is more concerned about Pass, who is in the same room with Licorice alone, but Casserole tells him he looks more pleased than concerned and says that the kids aren't alone, and they are with a chaperone. He also says Pastry will soon go for her sanctification, so there is no worry. Indeed, Kara is in the same room with the kids. She stands there, and it makes Pass uncomfortable. Pass asks her why she is there and not with Petra, but she says she works for Licorice. He even asks her to sit, but she refuses to do that. She gives him a scary face, and he stands back. He starts talking with Licorice, and suddenly he hears a sound. He asks her if she can hear it too, and before he tries to find out what is happening, they fall into a dark hole. The adults are called by Kara, who is scared that her lady is gone. Casserole tells them they don't have to worry because Pass will protect her. He asks Fuel to go to the house of Cattlesec to get reinforcement while he also jumps into the hole. Pass wakes up in a dark room with his hands tied. He tries to ask the boss why he has been kidnapped, but the boss tells him he has no obligation to tell him why. The boss leaves and asks one of his teammates to stay there. Pass tries to narrow down who could have ordered his kidnap, and to do that, he needs more information. He asks the man if they want to kill him and says he is the son of a noble and he could give them about 200 gold coins if they release him. The conversation fuels that man's interest, and he realizes that money could have been the motive of the kidnap and had been done by a noble. He looks around, and the house looks like that of a noble, but it is unkept, meaning the noble could be one who had been removed from his position for about 10 years. He recalls that they got a list of people who could be trouble for that union, and he thinks about the book and tries to search for the noble there who had been removed for about 10 years. He narrows it down to Armire, writes it on Licorice's scarf and sends it down the hole to his father. On the other hand, after Casserole gets inside the hole, he can't find a way, so he returns. Fuel returns and tells him General Cattlesec has refused to leave any man, and they think of what to do. They get the letter from Pass, and he swings into action. He tells Fuel to get some men from the engagement while he also takes some men from the men around the temple so they can match Armire's house. Fuel asks him to teleport him to Cattlesec's house at least, and he does so. At the hole in Armire's house, the boss arrives and reveals they had kidnapped the wrong girl, and Armire doesn't want to pay them. He reveals that Petra is a twin and Licorice is her twin. He says he wants to destroy all evidence by killing the kids, but before he hits Licorice, Pass hits him and removes the rope on his hand. Pass takes the sword asking the boss if he wants to surrender, but the boss refuses, so they set out to fight against each other.